Aloha kako and ikomo mai. Welcome. Today we have a 2007 Nissan Murano. The owner is complaining that the check engine light is on and that the engine is running really rough. So grab your snorkel and fins. We're going to dive right in. Alright, so on this car, we're going to locate the data link connector and connect up. Good to go. Okay, now that we have our scan tool hooked up, let's go through this process. As much as possible, I'm trying to shield this thing from the light outside so you can see the screen. Let's go through an auto ID. So we've got the key on. My scan tool says that it's working. Is this an 07 Nissan Murano 3.5? Yes, it is. Select a vehicle to replace. Let's see how messed up this thing is. So what the customer said was that it was driving fine and suddenly the engine started running really rough. And he was afraid that he was not going to make it to his destination. So it's something that happened instantaneously all at once. And then he reported that the check engine light came on. Okay, what do we have here? Wow, SRS1 code, ABS no codes, transmission 6 codes, ECM1 code, and OBD2 1 code. Let's look at these things. Okay, we have a P0301, cylinder 1 misfire detected. We have a P0725, engine speed sensor circuit malfunction. P1722, vehicle speed signal error. P0826, up and down shift switch circuit. And a P1701, backup error. P0615, starter relay circuit. Wow, we got a whole pile of stuff here. Driver airbag module open. B1054. Okay, we got a whole mess of codes here. I believe that this person is going to be interested mostly in getting his engine running smoothly again. So we're going to focus on that, and we're not going to pay any attention to the other ones right now. And if the customer wants to continue and go further than that, then we'll take it up at this time. But for right now, we're just going to concentrate on the drivability and getting this engine running correctly. So let's go ahead and start this thing up. Okay, right now I don't see the check engine light on or the service engine soon light on right at this moment, but I can certainly feel a continuous miss. It's very regular. It's coming through the steering wheel. I can feel it in the seat. It's just extremely regular beat, like a heartbeat. So let's look at that. Looking at the codes, the way this thing feels right now, this is what I'm going to be focusing on. P0301, cylinder number 1, misfire detected. So let's begin the process of looking at cylinder number 1. Alright, so we've got the hood open. I did an initial visual inspection and I didn't see anything that jumped right out at me as being wrong. So looks like we're going to have to be taking this cover off because this is cylinder number 1, 3, 5, and 2, 4, 6 on this engine. And we're looking at a problem on cylinder number 1, which means this air intake manifold right here has got to come off. So let's get to it. Alright, this is not strictly necessary, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this just because I like things out of my way, and if it takes me a little extra time, as long as I don't have to fuss with it, I'm good with that. So I'm going to be removing this section right here of shrouding, of air ducting I should say. And just lay it off to the side just so that it opens up a little more space for me. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take off this cover right here. And it looks like someone's been in here because these are, what is this? This is a 5mm hex Looks like someone's been in here because it looks a little on the strip side. Alright, we can see a few of the coils here on cylinders number 2, 4, and 6. As you can see, we've got to remove this whole section over here to get to these coil packs and the spark plugs on the other side. Alright, the next step is going to be removing the air induction hose from the air filter all the way to the intake manifold here, this whole pipe. So the first thing I'm going to do is loosen the clamp right back here. A little bit hard to see. Now remove this hose right here. Remove the mass airflow sensor. Just gonna pinch and pull the connector up. And then a couple clips on the outside. To wiggle that hose off on the throttle body side. Okay. So I've busted out a small GoPro camera, and I'm going to try to get a video of 2 bolts that need to come off before this intake manifold can come off. They're in the back, they're difficult to see, and I'm not sure whether I can get a video of these things, but I am going to try to stick this camera down there and see if we can do that. All right, going to try to keep it steady, so hopefully you guys don't get seasick. So I reviewed that video and I was able to actually get those bolts in view. There is 1 bolt missing already and the other one appears to be loose. So someone has been in here before. Who knows what they did, but we have to get both of those bolts out and I'm going to be doing that next. Alright, so I've gotten set up to take this bolt off back here. I'm going to be using a 12mm on a 1/4" drive ratchet. You actually have a little bit of room to turn back here with the 1/4" drive ratchet, so it's not too bad. It's just a matter of knowing where they are and getting to them. Okay, so here's that bolt. There actually should be 2 supporting the intake manifold. Looks like it goes down to the head area. But this one only has 1, so someone's been in here before. All right, continuing on. I'm going to disconnect the throttle body here. I'm going to disconnect these 2 hoses. When I'm going to disconnect hoses that are close to each other, I like to go ahead and put some kind of an identification mark on here. Usually I put a little paint with a paint pen. But if you're not familiar with things, definitely mark them all. Use tape, use whatever you have to mark, just so that you know which hose goes back where or which electrical connector goes back where if you're not familiar with this. So I have a little paint pen here. I like to use bright colors. This one happens to be yellow. So these things are stuck on here pretty good. In order to avoid breaking this plastic, I'm going to try and pry around it a little bit with a pick. So I just have a narrow pick here, and I'm just going to try and loosen up the hose on top of this fitting, just so I don't break it because it's plastic. And then kind of twist. Same for the other one. Just going to try to dig in here a little bit. Just break that seal that's on there. So the next thing I'm going to do is be removing this vacuum canister and this vacuum valve right here. And since I don't want to mess up which hose goes where, I'm also going to mark one of these. So that was a 10 millimeter. The other one looks like a 12. All right, we're just going to lay these off to the side like that. All right, so this intake manifold has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more bolts, a couple of vacuum lines on the back side over here, and a couple of coolant lines that come up under the bottom over here. I'll probably try to do the coolant lines last just so that I can move things around and might make it a little easier to get to them. So I'm going to take off these 5 bolts now and get to those back vacuum lines. Okay, this should be loose now, and I should be able to lift this up and move this a little bit so I can get to those vacuum lines in the back. Now the first thing that I'm going to do before this is I am going to go ahead and get a rag or a towel and stick it over this area right here so that nothing can fall down into the engine. I think it's a good practice, and I usually do something like that just to keep any tragedies from happening. If something drops down there like a gravel or a little screw or something like that, and you're not aware of it, then you could have major engine issues when you go to start this thing up. You could have a catastrophic failure caused by a rock or a loose screw or something that you were not aware that dropped down in there. So this is just an old towel. And I just want to make sure nothing falls in the air intakes down here. All right, I feel a little bit safer about that now. So back here is where these vacuum lines are. I'm going to reposition the camera and see if I can get a better shot. Okay, here's the back side of the intake manifold. Trying to get these 2 hoses off over here. They're vacuum hoses. This one right here goes to the brake booster on the other side. And this one right down here goes to the PCV valve. I'm probably not going to be able to film this being removed. I'm just going to be in my own way over here. But I wanted to show you where they were. Okay, one more item that I have to remove. This connector right here. And the wire anchor right here needs to come out. All right, I got the GoPro out again just because it's a really tight fit down here. I was able to move that intake manifold out a little bit. And as you can see, here's the 2 hoses, one right here and one right here. Just by moving this hose around a little bit, it just snapped right off. So these things are old and brittle, and they need to be replaced. I'm going to consult with the owner of this vehicle about that. But anyway, this one for sure has got to get fixed. So we're going to go ahead and get these off right now. Okay, this vehicle has over 132,000 miles on it. I don't think the plugs have ever been changed, so I picked up a new set of NGKs for this thing. Also picked up an intake manifold gasket set to use on this. And since I know that these cars are prone to have their coils fail, and we know that number one is missing, I picked up a coil just in case. So first thing we're going to do is pull out the coils, inspect them. If necessary, we'll do measurements on those, see what they look like. And we're going to replace the spark plugs. So the spark plug gap is 44,000, so the 1.1 mil. And then we're going to torque through the spark plugs to specs. And I found two different specs on this for this vehicle. One was 15 foot-pounds and the other one was 18 foot-pounds. I usually like to use a little bit of anti-seize on the threads of my plugs just to avoid problems. But don't put too much anti-seize on your plugs, then you will cause a problem. That anti-seize could run down and short out the plugs. So if you're going to put anti-seize on it, just use a little bit, use very sparingly. Okay, so next step is going to be pulling out the coils and pulling out the plugs. Here we go. Alright, so what I'm going to do before I pull these things out is I'm actually going to write the cylinder numbers on top of the coil so I know which coil came out of which cylinder. So this is number 1, 3, 5, 2, 4, and 6. And these are just 10mm bolts that hold these in. Alright, I'm just going to disconnect the connectors and pull these out. Just press on the tab, pull it back. Alright, number 2 looks pretty good. Visual inspection, number 4 looks pretty good. Nothing obvious there. Someone taped up this connector, which leads me to believe that it's probably broken. So I need to take off the tape to be able to get to this thing. Okay, well, I'm not sure why they ended up taping that up. All right, 6 looks pretty good. Let's move on to the rest over here. Number 5. First visual inspection, number 5 looks pretty good. Number 3 looks pretty good. Let's get to number 1 here. Looks like we have an issue here at number 1. I'm not sure if you guys can see that in this light, but number one is oil soaked, which means that the valve cover gasket is leaking and oil is getting down into number one spark plug. That's not good. All right, so let's go ahead and pull out this plug. These are just a normal 5/8 size spark plug socket. I'll pull out number one and see what it looks like. Wow, the spark plug socket is full of oil. I don't know if you guys can actually see that on there, but it's just soaked. It's like a swimming pool of oil there. All right, let's see if we can fish the spark plug out of here. Well, look at that. So this spark plug was swimming in a sea of oil. And it looks like there's some carbon tracking going on here. You may not be able to see that. Let me wipe this. So it looks like there may have been some carbon tracking going on, and instead of the spark jumping the gap over here, it was jumping to ground and causing that cylinder to misfire. So what we're going to have to do is go ahead and order some valve cover gaskets for this job. All right, just for grins, I pulled out a few extra spark plugs and there was oil in those spark plug wells also. So I'm going to contact the owner of the vehicle, see what they want to do, but they really need to change these valve cover gaskets. Put a fresh set of plugs in. I'll probably replace at least that number one coil because that thing was actually coming apart. It's been in the oil that long. So I'm going to contact the owner and we'll take it from there. Okay, Houston, we have a problem. I've received multiple reports that the valve covers are not serviceable and that they have to be replaced. And the problem has to do with the seals that go around the spark plug tubes. They report that that is not changeable. However, I've contacted my local auto parts store and they tell me that they have a kit and that these things should be serviceable. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and remove the valve covers and see if these seals are replaceable. And if not, then we will have to go ahead and replace the valve covers themselves, which a set of those things costs $300. So if I can save the customer some money this way, I'll do it. But I've already got permission to go ahead and replace the valve covers if necessary. All right, we're going to proceed with taking the valve covers off. Loosen up the injector harness over here. Do what you have to do. Usually there's a bunch of little clips in here. You kind of just pinch them. Push them out. All right, so I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bolts. 10 millimeters. This is going to be on here pretty tight, so let me go and grab a screwdriver. All right, just to keep junk from falling down in there. All right, we're going to be doing the same thing for the firewall side, except this one I'm just going to mark. number 1. And front of the engine. Alright, same thing on this side. Just remove the wiring harness as necessary.
Waiting for the day to come when Jesus sees arrive, knowing from the day they'll never be apart. Like an angel flying in the skies, like an angel living in disguise, like an angel I recognize, like an angel, she got angel's eyes, like an angel, 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 like an she has thoughts in her mind. Let her reach a point of grace and bound by God's kind. Like a child in the candy store, oh mama, please give me, she says, persistence and faith, cause she had only believed. Like an angel lying in the skies, like an angel hidden in disguise, like an angel I recognize, like an angel, she got angels.
Okay, that back one is a little more difficult to get to. Alright, let's just keep rubbish from falling down in here. And let's take a look at these valve covers, see if we can get the seals out. Alright, let's take a look at this seal here. I went ahead and I punched one out. And these seals are rock hard. There's no way that these things are going to seal the oil from getting into the spark plug wells. So they definitely are needing to be replaced. If you look at this on the inside here, this is where it came out of. So this plate that's molded onto the inside is actually covering the seal, which is why they say it's not serviceable. I suppose that if you took a hole saw and you came right around the edge and took that part out, then you could knock these seals out. And if this was my car and I was trying to be extremely cheap, I might do that. Or, 20 years from now when the Nissan 3.5 is no more and you can't find a part, then that would be a last resort way of doing this. But because this is not my car, it's just somebody else's car, everything that I do, everything that I modify, I'm basically responsible for. So not knowing that this is really going to work, or that it would do a good job, or that these pieces wouldn't come apart and fall into the engine someplace, I'm actually going to be replacing these valve covers. They do cost $300, and that's an unfortunate price point, but it's one of those necessary items. However, I will go ahead and knock another one out just to show you guys. So I'm going to knock the center one out, and as you can see, it's intact right now, and hopefully I can knock it out as easily as I was able to knock this one out. All I did is mount a large socket underneath. Use another socket on an extension, and hopefully this one comes out. Okay, once again you can see that this whole inside section got damaged and is in pieces here. Multiple pieces. So this is not something I would want to do and put in someone else's car. I'm definitely going to be, like I said, replacing these valve covers. But I wanted to show you that they actually can come out if you go ahead and remove this outer section first of this plenum. All right, time to clean up the mating surfaces for the valve covers. I'm not going to bore you with all the gory details. And as much as possible, you want to keep trash from falling down into your engine. So I usually try to keep things covered. I usually work in a little section at a time, and I often work with a vacuum cleaner going off at the same time. So I'll be scraping this with a scraper. I'll be using razor blades. I'll be using Scotch-Brite pads. I'll be using a variety of things in order to get this old silicone off and get these mating surfaces nice and clean. All right, so here's a new valve cover, and it came with a gasket. You can see this gasket here. There's a bunch of little nubs on it right here that help to hold it in place. You just want to make sure you push this thing all the way in and all the way around and try to lock this gasket into place. All right, if the parts are good, and this thing is jammed in as tightly as it'll go, you should be able to turn this thing upside down and shake it around and have the gasket stay. But it all depends upon the tolerance of the parts. So check it out, and if necessary, put a little bit of silicone in the bottom of the trough. All right, that looks pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and put this on now. What you want to do is put a nice bead of gasket maker right in the corners here, down here, and right here as well, just so that we get a good seal. All right, and while it's not strictly necessary, I just like to put a little bit of oil just on these surfaces on the inside here, just so that it can slide on better. Not much, just a little bit. I also like to grab my mirror and take a look on the back side and see if the silicone has squished out a little bit. Squished out of the sides. And also look to see if the gasket on the back side is set properly and it's not coming out. All right, that looks good. So let's put these bolts in.
Like an angel, 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 like an angel.
I'm just gonna cover the head of this bolt, piece of shop towel, and stick it in the socket. Just so I can stick it back there and have it not fall down. Torque specs for the valve cover are in two passes. First pass is from 9 to 26 inch-pounds, and the second pass is from 65 to 82 inch-pounds. And the sequence will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. adjust the torque wrench. 65 to 82. All right, 80 inch-pounds. I know I did all these already. I just like to go over it again in a circular pattern just to make sure I didn't miss any. All right, time to put some spark plugs in. I cannot find my spark plug gapper, so I grabbed my feeler gauges. Specs on these plugs are 44 thousandths of an inch. And I've got 42 thousandths of an inch worth of feeler gauges right here. And I'm just going to double check. These things come pre-gapped, but you should always at least eyeball them. If you're not too familiar with spark plug gaps, then definitely do something like this. Even if you don't have a spark plug gauge, find something like feeler gauges where you can get really close. So checking these, they are very close. That one's close. That one's right about there too. And that one's good. So I know that the gaps on these things are acceptable. What I like to do with my spark plugs is put just a little bit of anti-seize on the threads. And I mean just a little bit, just a smear. And you don't want to put it too close to the bottom either. You want to go 3 or 4 threads up at the very least. All I do is I put one little dab like that. And then I go ahead and I just rub it in over here. So you don't want this anti-seize to be too thick so that it runs down and shorts out the plug down here. I haven't run into that problem. I know it's possible, but I only put just a little bit of anti-seize on these threads. And clean up the porcelain, make sure you don't have any of that stuff on there. Okay, these are good. I'm going to go ahead and install these now. The spec on this, I found 2 specs actually. From the low spec was 15 foot-pounds and the high spec was 18 foot-pounds. Because I'm using anti-seize compound on these threads, I'm going to be using the lower spec of 15 foot-pounds to install these spark plugs. All right, let's install these spark plugs. All right, have my torque wrench set up to 15 foot-pounds. Okay, spark plugs in. I was able to secure a new valve cover for cylinders 1, 3, and 5, and I really needed a new one back there. That was the one that was causing all the issues. I was not able to procure one at this time for this cylinder, so I ended up reusing the old one. All right, so let's go ahead and put the coils back in. And now I'm going to do the same for 1, 3, and 5, putting the brand new coil in number 1. All right, we're getting ready to put the intake manifold back on. But before you do that, and after you've cleaned the surface, before you put the intake manifold on, do yourself a favor. Take a flashlight and look down, all the way down to the valves, and make sure you do not see anything in there like, I don't know, a rock or a screw or a nut or a bolt or anything that may possibly have fallen down in there. Cylinder numbers 1, 3, and 5 are easy to see. However, cylinder numbers 2, 4, and 6 are a little more problematic, so you're just going to have to get creative a little bit and take a look down there and make sure that you don't see anything. That one looks good. That looks good. I don't see anything there. And that one looks good too. Okay, our air runners are clear. I feel comfortable with putting this back together. Here's the new gasket. I'm just going to slide it on top of here. And once again, I'm going to put my towel back on top of there just to make sure nothing falls down there. All right, one final inspection before we put this intake manifold back on. All right, so this bracket right here, we'll align with this bracket right down here. The idea is to move this bracket past that bracket this way towards the driver's side, then push it in and then slide it over. All right, just a couple of finger tight knots here. And intake manifold bolts just kind of finger tight as well. All right, now I'm going to try to get that one back there. All right, that started, but we're actually going to tighten that one last. All right, we're going to tighten up the intake manifold bolts. It's actually a two-step process. It calls for like 5 and then finishing off with 15, and it's, if I remember correctly, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Basically working from the inside out.
Flying in the skies, like an angel hidden in disguise. Like an angel I recognize. Like an angel, she an angel's eyes. Like an angel, 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 like an
All right, got that down. Let's start putting things back together here. After I slid this thing into position, I should have put the coolant hoses on first, then put those hoses on in the back, the vacuum hoses. I can get to them. It's just that I should have done it that way to make it easier. But we'll make do. All right, we've got the coolant hoses on over here. We've got the vacuum lines on back there. Let's work on these vacuum lines right here. All right, I sprayed just a little bit of lube on here to make things easier to get on and off in the future. And when you put this thing on, there's a little keyway right here that slides in right here. So just align that, otherwise you might have some difficulties. Another thing I wanted to mention, just take a quick look at this boot right here. Just make sure that it's not cracked before you put it in. Sometimes it's old, and when you take it apart, it forms cracks. Then it lets air in behind the mass airflow sensor, and then all of a sudden the car runs really badly, and you don't know why. So just do a quick visual. These little clips on the air filter are being a little difficult. All right, there we go. And then just a couple clips on the other side. Mass airflow meter. That anchor back in. So the clamp back on. Eight millimeter socket on a long extension to tighten that clamp. Good idea just to check the tightness of the other clamps on the air induction hose here. Yep, won't fit on there. That's good. And just make sure they're snug so we don't have any air leaks. Let's finish the bolts for the vacuum canister and this vacuum switch. Okay, let's just do a visual inspection here. Make sure we didn't miss anything. Shake things around a bit. All right, let's put that engine cover back on and this air duct fairing over here. Let's see, let's take this off. Make it a little bit easier here. All right, the moment of truth has come. Let's start this thing up and see how it runs. Much better. That really regular miss is gone. The engine is smooth. I'm liking the way it sounds. Let's go ahead and go through our scan tool and erase the codes that are here. And maybe that's not a good idea. Okay. I may go ahead and erase the codes anyway. This gentleman is not going to want to do anything else. He just wants his engine running better. He knows that his airbag has a problem and that he has transmission codes and things of that nature. He was been informed, so he does not want to do any more. Let's go to diagnostic codes. Let's go to erase codes. Yes, I want to erase the codes. Let's just erase the engine codes. Okay. Back. No codes. Okay, so we've erased the engine codes. What I'm going to do now is give the car a test drive, and if it's running smooth, I'm going to let it go to him. Before I started it up, I actually did do a fluid check and check the engine oil and the radiator coolant and things of that nature. So I'm going to run it for a few minutes, bring it for a test drive, bring it back in, see if there's any leaks. And if everything looks good, I'm just going to call this done for now. So if you got any value out of this video, please hit the like button. And if you know anybody who could benefit from this video, please send it to them, share it with them. Sure appreciate that. Aloha from Kauai, and you too can do things Kauaian style. Aloha.